Suta had been declared a dead world by my Rose following the exterminators we had conducted on the poor planet. In theory, this meant nobody would be around to check on it, plus there might be some escaped Tyranid organisms around, in the asteroid belt or such. I wasn't worried about the Pharos installation, because its living rock bunker was made to contain a god, or at least the fragment of one. But 3 weeks later, I was proven wrong. A dozen Scythe's warships were prowling the Suta system, including a battle barge, and the idiots were even trying to land and excavate the entrance to the Pharos, using heavy tanks and exoskeletons on top of their power armor, called a Centurion. There was still molten rock and flowing lava covering the burned planet, as expected, but the Space Marines had a duty, and didn't seem to care about the harsh conditions. "Stop your digging, Scythes," I sent at once via the Vox. Their friendly chaplain, Lord Hornadle, appeared on my screen via a PIC transmission, in less than a minute. "Haven't you done enough, rogue trader?" he asked me in a disgusted voice. I smiled prettily with my new teeth. "Don't make me come there and punch you again, Astartes," I growled menacingly, just like Canis did beside me. Only his growl was 1,000 times more scary, because the wolf had grown to full size in the past year and his vocal cords thrummed with subsonic chords striking at your deepest fears. That seemed to work better than my pathetic threat, probably because a space wolf wasn't something anyone could have. "We have our duty, Lord Lancefire. Unless there's an Inquisitor backing you again, we will continue establishing the Fortress Monastery," the damn librarian announced proudly and shut off the transmission. "Okay then. Time to visit the vault and retrieve my special motivational implement." I held my left hand out and Ludvius dragged me out of the command chair. Funny, I know. But until my whole body was infused with the Sanguina blessing, using a power armor was still awkward. "You still don't stand a chance against a Space Marine, Lord Pef. Not to mention a chief_librarian," my Astartes friend muttered as a warning. I sighed in acceptance and patted his oversized pauldron. "I don't exactly mind the Scythes protecting the place, Ludvius. I just don't want them digging. That would be very bad, should the thing down there escape." Raffen rose an eyebrow, perhaps in surprise. "Ha. And you said guarding you would be boring, Captain Pef. You were ready to beat up a defenseless librarian, for his own good," he commented with a chuckle. "Not really defenseless, as long as the guy had psycho powers on his side. However, I did have a counter for that. Might still need to, if he doesn't behave. Thracius, phased munition clip ready, if you will," I demanded while marching past the last surviving Scythe in my retinue. The Astartes captain hesitated for a second, before following me and the Blood Angels into the elevator. "I'd rather not shoot at my own chaplain, Lord Pef. Bad form, and a betrayal of my oaths," he muttered in displeasure. I nodded grimly. "If the Khatan below escapes, then it would be bad form. I'm not confident I can defeat such a being, not yet," I explained in a sterner voice, and patted my loyal Canis as he pushed his bison-sized head into my shoulder for support. Thracius blinked and looked away. We would be all rather impotent against a god, no matter our duties and oaths. "So you know that secret as well, even though only captains have access to the old logbooks and the Foundling Codex," the Scythe grumbled to himself. In a few minutes, I reached the vault and took out the Sanguinius spear and an enslaver bone. I passed the spear to Raffen as if it was only a scene prop. "Hold on to this, Raffen. Try not to give in to those urges to shout benedictions and battle hymns." The veteran Astartes was rather impressed, but held on to his senses. So much power, no wonder Brother Archeo went mad with glory and pride. And yet, you don't even consider it a worthy artifact, instead choosing that Xenobone for yourself. He mused out loud. "The spear is strong, that's true. But only in the hand of a Primarch. I don't see wings growing on you, Astartes," I said in a sober tone, and opened the next vault with a sounding board. Soon enough, I mounted the ancient artifact on the Cyclops remote-tracked vehicle and had it advance in front of us towards the teleportarium. This Cyclops didn't have a plasma warhead inside, but it did have a few pairs of mechanical arms to secure its load. The hexagonal teleport platform already held an atomic warhead ready for deployment, just in case. Made it easy for me to simply lock onto a location and deliver a small sliver of sunfire, in just the right spot to illuminate some idiot's thoughts. Captain Thrusius wasn't stupid and saw this as well, because the warhead was deliberately marked with radiation warnings and Mechonicus litanies for soul purification. "I do hope our chaplain will be reasonable," he commented in apprehension. "Go on, Captain Thrusius. Speak to your spiritual leader, and have him listen to my advice. Fortifications yes, but no digging. I'll be down in the Pharos for other work." I invited him, while opening my chest plate to extract the rosette-shaped cog. With a flash, the scythe captain teleported beside the recalcitrant librarian. I could have beamed the atomic warhead instead, and he knew it very well. A minute later, the Cyclops and my group beamed straight into the Pharos main chamber, using the rosette to ping a locator beacon, left behind by a helpful Inquisitor. Almost instantly, my mind was assaulted with empathic links from the Pharos, a road guiding to safety or to ruin, I whispered with a forgotten memory. The Xenobone floated in front of me, ignoring the material reality. So I locked on the location of Trizin and pushed it gently with a finger. The air distorted and the bone vanished, emerging thousands of light years away, still afloat. "Enslaver bones are quite amazing, right?" I commented towards the surprised Necron Lord. "Is this another gift, stranger?" He wondered after a minute of silence, probably after updating his esoteric defenses and scanning the alien bone for danger of a different nature. "A gift for someone. An Inquisitor of Ordo Xenos will be the one to find the ship engine, when it's ready. And she will need a potent mind shield and mind lance crafted from that bone. I expect you have already retrieved the chronofield blade, and perhaps the immortal bearer as well." I explained and turned off the mental link. Knowing the Necron Lord's abilities, he had surely confiscated the Xenoblade and its user, possibly already a decade ago. Temporal manipulation was easy for Trizin the Infinite, and a path to achieve plenty of objectives or artifact collections, just like that entire Tyrannid fleet he kept in his Tesseract field. I wasn't going to lose my parents in this universe. With some Deus Ex Machina magic, they could be extracted through time, just like missing Primarchs or Dark Age of Technology artifacts. However, trading with Trizin wouldn't be easy at all. He was still a monster, and not quite sane. Luckily, the galaxy was literally crawling with relics and heroes that Trizin could be enticed to collect and save. And now that I have proven my own ability to transport valuable artifacts in an instant, the ancient robot zombie would have to be wary and cautious, since he stood to lose much more. Instead of a simple exotic bone, there could have been a scrap code warhead or something just as annoying. I turned to find Rathan posing in a victory stance with the holy spear held valiantly over his head. Damn idiot. "Rathan. What did I tell you? No pride and glory, until you grow wings," I shouted at him and pointed my finger down. The veteran caught himself and rapidly lowered the spear, hiding it behind his back, like a child caught playing with matches. "Hee. Sorry, Captain," he declared in a not-too-sorry voice. Ludvius chuckled and grinned as this was a good joke. "Astartes Rathan needs to pray and meditate on his actions, Lord Pef. Such behavior is unseemly for a mere sergeant." I sighed and returned to scanning the segmentum for more useful real-time events and incoming attacks. Couldn't do much about thousands of human worlds under attack from hundreds of various Xeno or traitor bands, but I could keep an eye for the precious Forge worlds and send a relief fleet to arrive at an opportune time. I turned my attention on the Badab sector that lies within the Maelstrom zone of the Segmentum Ultima. This area of the galaxy has become a haven to pirates, heretics and renegades. The Maelstrom Zone is a region of lawless wilderness containing about 24 orc empires, 15 Ood infestations, and 100 human pirate strongholds. I engaged the Remembrancer implant to mark down targets for rapid conquests and ship acquisition. A wealth made of 1,000 destroyers, 100 cruisers and even a few battle cruisers could be obtained in my next crusade, although for effective shipboarding I would need more Astartes. Like these scythes, wasting their time defending a magma world. Plus, if I do manage to confiscate those pirate ships, the future tyrant fleet will be much smaller, and thus reduce the amplitude of their rebellion. But first, I would need to eliminate the enormous danger posed by the Dark Forge of Garmk. And even if I might succeed with a deep strike modeled after the Death Watch, there was no real need. I had the means to exact retribution right here. "Please be quiet, both of you," I murmured while delving deep into the Pharos powers. The teleport function worked backwards too, and you could bring something to you, if you knew your target well enough. And I did. In a flash, the cyclonic torpedo aboard my canticle materialized inside the Pharos chamber and I started working, using my Rosetta to activate the catastrophic warhead, releasing the safeties one by one. After a long hour of tense ordnance activation protocols, the twin-stage warhead activated and began humming ominously. A short prayer towards the Emperor, for success, and the torpedo vanished in a spatial distortion. I felt tired suddenly and fell into a groaning armchair left behind from the previous visit. There we go. Garmk should be purified in 3, 2. I muttered tiredly as the Pharos link with the device vanished abruptly. Struggling to keep my eyes open, I tried to locate the corrupted Forge world, but there was only fire and screaming souls in that spot. It probably worked. Ludvius shook me awake some time later, holding the spear in his other hand, while Raffen was kneeling and praying a bit farther. Served him well, playing with a sacred relic. I also made a note about the mental strain caused by long-range teleports, and then shrugged. I would do it again, against such a potent threat. Sadly, I was out of Exterminatus-grade munitions, for now. My dear Rose, what do your tarot cards say about the maelstrom? I asked in my mind. After a few seconds, she answered a bit surprised. I should have known that was you. Back on Suta? She asked, just to be sure. Permission to target the Necron Bone Kingdom with our secret weapon? I asked instead. The Inquisitor remained silent for a long minute, which wasn't that good. Proceed with caution, trader. And no more executing Inquisitors, if possible. That guy you wasted on Shenlong had powerful backers, in the higher ranks of the Inquisition. They are not happy, even if the traitor's body and the rosette were recovered. Other important items were missing, somehow. Anyway, we will need 100 air purifiers at Suta, and perhaps a couple more bicycles. And then, a lucky Inquisitor might find something of true value for humanity. Only she would need to visit a place called Styges_8 and recruit 1 million radical tech priests for a permanent expedition to the fringe. I advised her in a soft tone. I did miss my Rose. From the vault on Canticle, a secret inquisitorial logbook appeared in my hand, then emerged into her own lap, even as far away as she was. A psychostaff followed a few seconds later. Oh, you kept them for me. That was really sweet. Jane could use this stick as she learns how to walk. Rose replied dismissively. No mention of the logbook, so it probably was important. Well, I suppose my blank navigator daughter could use the gifted psychostaff just as well. Rose surely had her own devices, possibly just as potent. Kiss our Janice for me, and have her look into the future of Forge Mordax. I rather not evaporate the place like I had to do with Dark Forge Garmk, just now. The name Moradaka doesn't bode well for their chances. I asked in a slightly sterner voice. She was an Inquisitor, so she could well deduce what a name change would imply. It will be done, my dear Ogue. And why would this busy Inquisitor care about those Xena-loving tech priests from Styges? She wondered, this time in a cold warning tone. How about a spaceship drive that doesn't use the warp? Something rather simple to build too, almost like the ancients predicted the decay of technology and science of their descendants, I whispered in a secretive tone. I didn't say it was of human origin, or Xeno. I didn't even know what the Necron invention will look like, except in size and materials. But, I assumed it will be somewhat similar to the mechanical Geller fields, only even more simpler in design. My Rose smiled mentally, perhaps too used to my own fake STC templates. It made sense for her, and I wouldn't shatter her illusions. If such a thing exists, but then you already told me it will. That huge goal of yours, it would require warpless engines. So I should lead these heretics to your domain, and let them work on this ancient drive, outside the Imperium and its regulations. Rose mused while considering my proposal. Exactly. But they will need to provide a few universe-class conveyors, all filled with forgers and servitors and tech priests. I'm not that rich and powerful, you know? I explained a bit more meekly. Right, you didn't kill the traitor Primarch Lorga at Forge Shenlong either. Just a tiny mouse, with no power. She replied in dismissal. I grinned widely. It had been an unlikely accident. So you heard about that? I only shot him a few times, with the canticle, I said in mirth. I shot Fulgrim with everything I had and didn't even faze him. Don't tell me you splattered a Primarch by accident. Rose complained and laughed in my mind. I shook my head in amusement. Oh no. I deliberately urged the canticle to shoot all our lance batteries at the winged thing. I just didn't know who he was, until Ludvius told me. Take care, my Rose, I concluded the mental link, then softly brushed Janice's mind. See, my love. Daddy has the best gifts, right, Dad? This staff is amazing. And I can talk to my big sisters now, with my mind. Are you going to make more sisters with them, like with Mommy? Janice asked in an enthusiastic tone. I blinked and drew back, using my mind's eye to look around the warded room on their ship, filled with gorgeous if stunned silent sisters. Well, Rose had excellent taste in picking concubines for me. I wouldn't refuse a dozen blank Amazons, if they were willing. Only if they like me, Janice. But we blanks have to stick together, so they should like me a little. Also, I have a puppy, so there's that. Girls love puppies. I answered a bit amused, and sent her an image of Canis when he was much smaller. Puppy. The girl yelled in my mind, quite painfully. I had to cut the connection, before her prodigious mental powers overwhelmed me. Perhaps the Psyker daughter wasn't all joy, even when she was happy. Then I turned my attention towards the ghoul stars, and located the tomb world filled with insane Necron flayers. The Tyranids will not be so easily flayed, I suspect. The Pharaohs complained a bit, but managed to shift the illumination beacon on that world. The entire planet shook, since this seemed to be to maximum range of the warp lighthouse. What's happening, Captain? Ludvius asked a bit worried, looking at the shaking walls around us. The Inquisitor said to divert the beacon onto the next target, now that Mandragora has been devoured by the Hive Fleet Kraken. The Necron world of Drazak, home to the demented flayed _1 will receive a fresh influx of meat and bones soon. I try to help them, you see? I explained patiently. My bodyguard just nodded and smiled grimly. Raffen was more circumspect and stared at me for a long minute. That device, it is too potent for a mere oak trader to use. First, you sent a cyclonic torpedo right into the maelstrom, enacting exterminatus on a dark Mechonicus forge, with barely a headache. And now, diverting a whole hive fleet onto the Necrons. I nodded wisely and held a hand to be brought back to my feet. All true. And this is just the beginning, my friend. The Inquisitor will bring a few hundred more gifts for our enemies. Here in the Ultima Sector, I will tolerate no more Xeno-empires and traitor holdings. Or at least, nothing that would be truly dangerous to humanity. The veteran Blood Angel looked in my eyes and nodded. Not so boring after all. I was right, he concluded and patted my pauldron in encouragement. I also know a way to resist the Black Rage, Raffen. Painful, but doable. Do you wish to attempt it? I asked in a curious tone. His face told everything. It would be my honor, Lord Pef. Another magic of this device? Ludvius stepped beside him, asking for the same honor wordlessly. The Black Rage was always a terminal threat in their minds, and they knew it very well. How? Just tell us, Raffen demanded a bit forcefully. You need to return to Bale, and ask your apothecary to entomb you in the same sarcophagus you were implanted. Then find an ancestor brother to help you, while asking the angel for his aid. It will work, but it will hurt a lot. Your choice. I explained with a small shrug. Ludvius held the spear for me, but I declined. I couldn't actually use its powers anyway. That spear needs a potent psyker, and I'm not. But tell Lord Dante I can always reach out and take it, if he lets it rust in some vault. Farewell, my friends. I added as the space distorted and my bodyguards vanished, to emerge on their chapter's home world. I still had about 80 Blood Angels on the canticle, and I planned to recruit the Scythes as well. Plus my blank sons undergoing implantation as Blood Angels on Bale would need my bodyguards to teach and keep them safe. And that enslaver bone will serve me much better than a relic spear, especially after Trazyn worked it into a real artifact. Not that I planned to get into close fights with anything, but sometimes war came to you. It happened before. The temptation to act like Trazyn and begin gathering artifacts and people to my side was powerful, but I didn't want that. Guiding my sons and daughters into easier paths was something else. Soon enough, I had a dozen ships sailing across the stars to liberate important worlds, or support a forged world at key moment. Finona and her squadron was sent to acquire a mining system full of radioactive minerals, now named radium, while Larisa sailed towards a nearly finished Mercury-class battlecruiser at Forge World Kona. The Red Planet didn't classify Kona as Forge, which was kinda silly in my opinion. They made warships by the dozen every year, including that long-awaited Mercury. But now, they could change focus and begin mass-producing corvettes and destroyers, and give me a slightly upgraded cruiser for a small price. A dozen data slates arrived in Larissa's hands, filled with nearly all my fake STC templates. Things that other Forge worlds had, and might even claim as their patented machines, but it wouldn't matter. Kona was not a Forge world after all. They could make whatever they wanted, and had to be ignored. Sure, they didn't have many templates right now, using only common templates to all Forge worlds, nothing special or critical. But 200 more sacred STC patterns, some of them unseen anywhere till now, would force Mars to change their stance and upgrade the so-called Kona research station to a full Forge world. Quite worthy in exchange for a single ship, or so I hoped. The nearby Forge Gands will also receive a few patterns, but as they built exclusively for the Ultramarines, I didn't have much that would interest them, except Land Raider and Rhino patterns with slightly more enhanced capabilities. After all this, I teleported back to the Canticle, and began the slow maneuver to dock with Ejida, the burnt fortress monastery in orbit above Sutha. I had a few harsh words to speak with the scythes of the Emperor. The Requiem, my escort frigate, took station under the Canticle, to protect the weakest side from ambush, while myself and 40 Astartes of the Blood Angel chapter embarked in my Stormbird shuttle and docked with the scythe battle barge called the Heart of Sutha, which was also parked at Ejida to hasten the repair of the ancient battle station. I did leave the rest of my Astartes company on the Canticle, because this was a war zone. Peaceful at the moment, but I knew better. Chaos, Necron and Tyrannid ships have visited here before, and the burned husk of the planet was the tragic result. Hornidal, the mouthy chaplain, awaited me among his own Astartes company. You seem to have grown in importance, rogue trader. From a mere light cruiser to a full overlord class. And a company of blood angels in support, for some strange reason. He began, dressed in a full regalia of purity seals and scintillating golden scythes decorating his power armor. But now I had my own power armor, and a Rosarius on top. Plus a toothy engine of destruction at my side, called Canis. You wonder how his flesh tastes like, puppy? Perhaps we will find out, one sunny day, I whispered fakely and petted my huge wolf. Canis snorted at me softly. Enough posturing, Lord Lancefire. Captain Thracius did explain the dangers of digging towards the buried Pharos, and thus the excavation has stopped. Especially since the interior appears to be accessible via the teleportarium. The Psycho-Astartes proclaimed while posturing with a glow of his own. I nodded and removed my helmet, since this would be rather important. The defense of Sutha is still important to humanity, Lord Hornidal. We will aid by assembling a new ring of fortified asteroids for this purpose, and even loan you a few thousand tech priests and the use of my onboard forge to produce las cannons and flak batteries. The chaplain seemed surprised and then sighed in acknowledgement. Should we expect yet another wave of enemies here? The Blood Angels snorted as if amused, so I smiled as well. We should always expect enemies, Astartes. Reinforcements as well, because we are not alone. Until then, begin gathering sickly serfs from your lower decks for their final task, in this life. The cult Mechonicus priests will convert them into useful servitors and machine spirits for the forts, to protect Sutha. Lord Hornidal nodded and waved his hand forward. These two sergeants, Astartes Certs and Edios, will be provided as your bodyguard, since Captain Thracius has been tasked with a new mission at the behest of Ultramar. Good enough for the moment, chaplain. But I will need 2 companies for boarding operations by next year. Make it happen, I demanded while walking past him towards the bridge. I was curious if the Heart of Sutha will allow me to command it. The 2 Scythe veterans followed me while surrounded by my other, slightly more loyal Blood Angels. None of them could be truly trusted though. For history did show too many cases of elite soldiers defecting or going mad, and all Astartes had a rather deterministic chance to fall to chaos. The Inquisition didn't help, as they tended to simply exterminate those who knew or even fought chaos forces, preempting any chance for humanity to become vaccinated by exposure. I wasn't an expert, and perhaps natural resistance did not evolve. Either way, I had a solution with my blank gene plan: among my clan first, then the Blood Angels, my private empire, and lastly the entire humanity. Someday. However, in the Imperium there would be enormous direct and indirect opposition for my plans, due to the organizations like the Ordo_Hydra or the Cabal or many other secret societies invested in keeping their power base or destroying humanity. I had decided to stake my bets with the cult Mechonicus, although even they had a whole share of problems. But the tech priests could actually manufacture ships and weapons and robots and forts, and all those would buy me time. "Move," I demanded from a scythe occupying my chair. The man turned in surprise, only to find himself yanked by a few Blood Angel and set aside. "Your chair has been liberated, Lord Lancefire," Captain Raxiatel proclaimed in a sneer. I just sat down and flipped the null box lid, opening it for a centimeter. Not enough to blind the room with clavis engrams, but the heart of Sutor would recognize the codes even so. "Throne agent authentication detected, Ordo Xenos, Pef Lancefire. Purge the Xeno." The sentient construct boomed in my mind, and I closed the null box before it started proclaiming all the allegiance protocols, which would take hours. "That is enough, for now. Show me inventory and munitions," I asked while closing my eyes and relaxing. As expected, the battle barge was provisioned quite well, especially as it just arrived from Ultramar. Full load of torpedoes, plasma batteries, a dozen lances, 2 Geller fields, and 3 powerful void shields, much like all the barges. Some battleships had 4 void shields, but then barges were not exactly built for fleet engagements, but for planetary assault. I marked the location of the Exterminatus and Vortex warheads, because I was prepared to suffer more headaches in exchange for obliterating a few more Chaos worlds. Attack was the best defense, and long-range Exterminatus would warm the hearts of even the coldest traitors. Then I began exploring the vaults, marking valuable relics and weapons kept in stasis for some obscure reason. Surely my voidsman could use force fields and plasma pistols just as well as an Astartes. An hour later, I realized I had become just like Trazin, visiting people and stealing their stuff. His attempt at stealing the staff _of the destroyer came to mind, just as I locked onto a glowing scythe held in stasis in a hidden vault. I mean, these poor guys probably didn't even know they had a real relic on board, quite certainly a force weapon able to behead greater demons or something. I must have lost track of time, delving deep into the hidden mysteries of the battle barge, because a gauntlet shook my shoulder making Canis growl menacingly. "What now?" I asked, a bit annoyed. "Lord Pef, must you always take the command seat everywhere you go?" a rather annoyed Captain Throsius asked me. "If the alternative is to allow some cannibal Ogren to sit in that chair, then yes. I thought you left for Ultramar already," I answered while slowly clearing my head. This barge was also in need of repairs, especially the teleportarium and the Geller generatoriums, for which the Scythes lacked the expertise to repair. They were warp-based technology, not just guns and plasma reactors, after all. I took my time to instruct these brother sergeants what to expect from you, Lord Pef. "Your methods are slightly unorthodox," he explained with a faint smile. Okay, that made sense. I glanced at the 2 new bodyguards. Astartes Certs and Idios. "You lack brain implants and anti-psycho defenses. Report to the Canticle and ask for biologist tech priest juggler to fix you. I have no need for those weaknesses, in people expected to defend me against plots and psychers." While saying this, I turned off the barge's active sensors, and created a warning siren if they were enabled again. Then I dragged myself up, using the durable armrests of the command chair, meant to be used by Space Marines. "Where to now, Lord Pef?" Captain Raxiatel asked while I looked around the bridge. "Torpedo room," I said, and immediately pointed at Scythe Neophyte blinking surprised at his dead Auspex station. "You contact the torpedo master and let him know I will inspect his stores. And don't enable those teleport beacons for enemy borders, if you can." The newly implanted Astartes blinked in confusion and glanced at the former chair occupant. I didn't care right now, but I was almost certain they wouldn't listen. Not yet. We didn't manage to reach the torpedo room before loud sirens started blaring from all the speakers and vox boxes inside the barge. Battle stations. The bridge has manually enabled boarding actions against the ship. All personnel defend vital stations. The alert didn't stop, and kept going its same deafening volume while I inspected the torpedo stores, taking care to touch and memorize the Exterminatus and Vortex torpedoes, while the scythes ran around in confusion. While I didn't have the scythes codes for activation, I knew my rosette would be accepted, since even the barge's machine spirit did. By the time someone with more experience found a problem and turned off the sirens, my shuttle was already exiting the hangar, with me grinning like a schoolboy. You think they learned the lesson? I asked my new bedroom guard. The Blood Angel captain tapped his forehead to power up his own savant implant. Logic didn't come easy for men like him. Oh, you meant the Auspex sensor returns? Nope. I'm certain they think it was just a prank, like you're famous for, my lord, he concluded in a certain voice. Oh well. They shouldn't be surprised if a few torpedoes vanish mysteriously then. I tried to give them a fair chance. I slept like a baby afterwards, since the mental energy I consumed was quite exhausting. For a mere mortal anyway. But when I woke up, I saw Captain Raxiatel sip a little from my CF, possibly checking for poisons or other assassination methods. Tough job, but he wouldn't die of old age anyway. No space marine had ever died a peaceful death. Plus, poisons might not even give him a tummy ache. These guys could digest concrete. Canis mewed something long that should mean good morning, lazy bones, so I petted him for his loyalty. Ka-arf, I uttered in my best morning zombie voice, afraid the miraculous cure will be drained by my guardian angel. But the hateful Blood Angel just waved the steaming cup a bit, forcing me to leave the comfort of my fluffy captain bed and crawl towards the lure. You should not become dependent on this cheap neurotoxin, Lord Lancefire. If there are battles to be fought soon, we will need your brains at full capacity. He announced me in a serene voice and gulped the precious liquid in a single slurp. I crashed on the carpet in defeat, while Canis wailed in despair beside me. The Blood Angel was right, of course. I already felt the sanguinary transformation affecting my brain, and the juggler scanned me every night to provide medical updates. At least I didn't have to waste time in a medical pod, so it was convenient. But he didn't have to torment me with the enticing smell. Sighing deeply, I stumbled in my shower for a quick refresh, letting the water cool gently until it became icy. As effective as CF, if somewhat less pleasant. Another flippant warm air bathed my body and left me dry and clean and most importantly awake. What is the largest enemy around here? I asked the Astartes as I began dressing up for work. That meant a thermal sleeve suit, and then my looted power armor. What do you mean, my lord? Hive Fleet Kraken or something like that? He asked to be sure. I shook my head and powered up the cogitator, loading the Ultima Segmentum map. Then I traced an arc, centered on our location and reaching halfway to Terra, into the depths of the Segmentum. A worthy target for a deep Exterminatus strike. I tend to lean towards a Hellforge, like Samek or perhaps Sarum. What do you say, Captain? I asked him, turning towards him. I could see his eyes measure the arc with concentration, no doubt going through a list of hated enemies and valuable targets. Well, the Dark Forge of Sarum would be an excellent target if possible. Last time the Imperium tried, we lost all our ships and troops. And then, there is the corrupted Forge of Junkata, already providing the enemy with a squadron of battleships and a myriad of demon engines. I'm not sure why the strike range is so limited though. The Canticle can surely travel anywhere in the galaxy. He mused thoughtfully. I nodded and added Junkata to my target list. 3 cyclonic torpedoes set aside for this task, and 1 remaining for another day. 3 vortex torpedoes as well, but I would only take 2, in case the barge really needed extra firepower. For Octarius, the capital of a huge orc empire, I reserved an atmospheric incendiary torpedo, which should cleanse all biomass of the Xenos race before it became too strong to defeat. Another one for Mandragora, to eliminate that huge tyrannid tendril before it departed for a more tasty world, possibly one of mine. Wenchen would have a short window afterwards, to mine precious blackstone for ourselves. Blackstone, or as my buddies in the Mechonicus called it, Noctilith, was abundant on Necron worlds, but sadly those worlds were also usually abundant in Necrons, which made mining slightly more difficult. Mining on Mandragora would be hard, but only due to melted rocks, not enemy fire or claws. I would have to consider where to deploy the vortex torpedoes for best effect. Eldercraft worlds would suffer greatly, or perhaps the Tau. Give them a bit of chaos to upgrade their technology a bit faster. One for each then. I could be generous to both of them. I decided on Craftword Alatok, because these Xenos were the most annoying, often becoming corsairs and outcasts and raiding human worlds. Let them be raided by a few pink demons, for a change. And, so I did, teleporting down into the depths of the Pharos, and accidentally abducting a handful of torpedoes from the heart of Sutha. Let's say my mind slipped. First I brought all the torpedoes down, before taking a break to clear my mind. Dear Rose. So I heard that Dark Forge Sarum has been bad and needs to be punished. Permission to exterminate. I sent to my beloved Inquisitor. Pef? Did you steal some Exterminatus-grade munitions from someone? My Inquisitor demanded sternly. I declined to answer, because that would be admission of a capital crime. Let's say I found them. But my Rosetta works well enough to activate the ignition protocols. So, was that a yes? I asked to make sure, although the humming warhead already vanished from the Pharos. It was dangerous to keep such a weapon inside closed doors. Fine. But you better have an ironclad alibi, you hear me? She yelled in my mind. I swear, nobody saw me leave the ship. Except Canis, so I guess it doesn't count. I explained patiently and hugged my faithful wolf, more for support since my knees were kinda weak. A minute passed in silence, before my Rose finished casting her tarot. You want the good news or the bad? She asked me in a tired voice. The bad, I guess, I murmured as I triggered the teleport to return to the ship with my last reserves of energy. Long-range teleports of big objects were hard, who knew? Thus, I never heard the bad news. Someone found me and called the jugular, and soon I was deposited in the medical bay with a dozen cables and conduits inserted in painful places. I woke up the next day perhaps, to find Decimar holding my hand in worry. What are you doing, husband of mine? Even the Magus is confused how drained you were. Can't answer that, beloved. Sealed by my Rose, I'm afraid, I whispered in a dry voice. My wife inserted a straw between my teeth and fed me some refreshing juice, still without caffeine. Whatever you did, has our Lord Navigator in fits of panic, and the chaplain of the Scythes shouting about punching you again, Decimar continued after I felt a bit more hydrated. Canis lifted his huge furry head and nosed me with a pitiful look. Don't worry, puppy, I wasn't dying. Most likely. But I really needed to know the bad news now. Lord Holborn, come visit me when you have time. I spoke gently on the Vox speed. In a violet flash, the Navigator appeared in the corner of the room, causing a few medical devices to sputter and spark blue flames. Pef Lancefire, you are a crazy madman. Well-intentioned, I assume, but utterly insane. He complained while his Aquila relic began glowing strongly, both eyes of the eagle turning a piercing blue shade. I patted Decimar's hand gently. Perhaps you should wait outside, love. Canis can keep me safe, as can those two veterans beside the door. I advised her politely. My wife snorted and huffed, then walked away like a storm. So what happened, Navigator? I asked while sitting myself higher on the pillows. The Immaterium has shifted brutally, Captain. We are stranded here, for however long it takes for the currents to settle. Also, a large Empyrean was released back into the warp, a powerful being called Sarum, or perhaps Sarum. The tides of the future are turned upside down, for those of us that can sense it. The Navigator told me in a glacial voice. I turned on the implants to meditate of his words. The first thing was likely the beacon shift, which had been turned on the opposite side, from south of Sutha to the north. Bad news, but I expected this. The other part though. Perhaps a great demon was bound into the depths of the Dark Forge? If the corrupted planet detonated from my torpedo, the demon would most likely die and return into the warp. If it didn't die, well, I had nothing that could stop a great demon. One of those could massacre a Tyrannid hive fleet by himself, like I recall one of them doing during the devastation _of_ Bale. Anyway, nothing I could do about it. I completely deny any allegations of such actions, Navigator. First of all, I'm a blank. Nothing to do with warp or demons or immaterium currents, even if I wanted to. Not sure why you blame me for all this? I asked in fake innocence. The Navigator glanced at Canis and huffed in annoyance. Why are you in bed then? He demanded in a lower voice, as his relic began to tone down the glow. Ask my doctor, which I'm not. Something to do with my body changing and exhausting myself with command. Or perhaps my concubines. Or my brain implant acting up. Possibly all three and more. I personally blame that angel on Estobon. I answered in outrage. It was all true as well. Just not the whole truth. Lord Holborn wasn't stupid, but he had no way to prove I was responsible. He snorted and vanished in a purple flash, because psychers. The bodyguards shrugged and checked their bolters on reflex. Psychers had that effect on people, I suspect. By next day I was back on my feet, but I decided to let myself recharge for a week or so. Those hellforges weren't going anywhere, and only I had access into the interior of the Pharos where the missing torpedoes rested. So I spent my day in bed, enjoying the command privilege of having two sisters of battle doing their best to relieve my stressed mind. Helena and Catherine didn't mind at all, and it all worked great. Until a certain chaplain heard what I was doing and decided to visit me anyway. Damn bodyguards. It will take some time to turn their loyalties towards me. They even allowed the chaplain to enter my rooms while carrying weapons, damn idiots. Chaplain, I do not intend a religious marriage with these amazing women, so your services are not needed. I explained politely. The Psyker Astartes sneered in disgust. I'm not that kind of chaplain, Lord Lancefire. I guard the purity of my brothers' souls. I sighed and urged my concubines away. Fun time is over, ladies. Go, you have patients to care for, in the nursery. In a minute, my room was occupied only by a psyker, a dog and a blank, as my so-called bodyguards nodded politely and walked out. What is happening, Lord Pef? The astropaths are baffled, the navigators are scared, the alarm keeps blaring on the battle barge and it seems some torpedoes have vanished mysteriously. He asked in a softer voice, and seeming worried. Then again, as a psyker these events hit him much harder. Well, the situation is very complex and yet simple enough. Suta is important, more than you knew. But you have to remember it was declared a dead world and interdicted by the Inquisition following the Exterminatus. Without my approval, nobody is allowed in this system. Not even your Primarch, if he returns sooner than I predict, I said in a level voice, but deadly serious. Entire Space Marines chapters have been hunted down and exterminated for going against an Inquisitor. The Astartes realized this just as well. I think I begin to understand. You would have burned us alive, if we did stay to defend Suta. And now what? We are your personal army, to maneuver however you need? He asked just to be sure. I don't need your entire chapter, Lord Hornidle. Nor are you subject to permanent duty, like these blood angels. The battle barge and 2 Astartes companies will aid me in my task, involving many hostile boardings of pirate vessels. In exchange, I will establish an Inquisition fortress on the Aegida, and provide orbital defenses for the Pharos. A company of your scythes will take the Black and be stationed on Aegida, with a pair of strike cruisers for rapid deployment in this volume, I declared in a gentle voice. He knew how things worked in the Imperium, this chaplain. So she is coming here. Well, when travel will become possible again. Do you know how human eyes work, chaplain? We simply absorb light with our eyes, and create an image of what is outside, in our minds. But imagine you had to see by projecting light outwards, then see the shadows. That's how the auguries work. We project lasers and other types of radiation outwards, and decode the returning echoes. But the enemies see those lights as well. And if these enemies have machines, or psychers, they can trace the beam to the source, right inside your ship. I added in a simplistic lecture. Hornidle stopped to think, since this might have been too much science for his fanatical brain. Turn off the lights, the enemy cannot teleport inside our ships? He asked after a long time. Yes. He completed a miracle by himself. It's not a perfect solution, but we have void shields and other means to block their scans. Without obtaining a fixed destination, teleporting through warp is near suicide. I'm certain a clever ancestor did create an STC pattern to solve this problem, but it might have been lost. I mused in low tone, as I just figured out how to solve it. So we just use our eyes, and perhaps other passive auguries. Send nothing out, they can't get in. Clever. The chaplain said, nodding in approval. Pretty sure Astartes already use this wisdom when fighting on the ground. Keep an eye closed to preserve night vision and other tricks like that. Learning to think is painful, but ultimately very rewarding. Especially if you aim to preserve the lives of your brothers, I concluded while pointing at the door. Wait. What about the missing torpedoes? He asked in near panic. I shrugged innocently. I'd assume only someone with the right authorization can use them, so they're very safe wherever they are. I did try to safeguard them, but someone turned the auguries back online, leaving the door open for a mysterious force to abscond with your devices. The Inquisitor will be very upset with whoever authorized that reckless action. The chaplain gritted his teeth in near anger. So I hope, Lord Peth. This mysterious force better be benevolent and target only Xenos or other enemies of humanity. If I was a psyker, I would try to locate where those devices might have landed. Cyclonic torpedoes do make a big splash when they hit something. But alas, I'm quite the opposite of a psyker, a mere blank that can't even make a fire without a lasgun. I complained in a pitiful voice. The psyker snorted audibly and walked out, stomping a little too hard. What do you say, Canis? What do you want to play with today? Fire, big fire or warp fire? I asked my trusted friend. The space wolf tilted his head and eyed me with concern. Woof woof, he declared after a long minute of deliberation. I smiled and grabbed his head for a tight hug. Big fire, you say? Don't tell me you are that mysterious force the punching bag asked about. Woof, Canis proclaimed proudly. I knew it. Well done, puppy. So, you wanna take the flashy elevator or the dizzy one? I asked to make sure. Woo, the puppy complained. I guess he didn't like either, since even dogs would feel their stomach turn inside out after a teleport. I took note and sent him to watch over the nursery instead. As soon as I was dressed and armored, I opened the door to find my Blood Angel captain berating the Scythe bodyguards for leaving me alone with a known violent offender that had already beaten me gravely one time. I kinda agreed with the sentiment, to be truthful. Luckily, blanks were not easy to be read by psychers, so I wasn't completely exposed. Walk with me, Captain. I asked the Blood Angel before turning towards the Scythes of the Emperor. You two, stay. No, guard the Geller generator instead, for next 2 weeks. Hopefully without letting demons in, because they are psychers. I told them in a warning voice. That should teach them a small lesson. Plus the Geller field was quite vital anyway. Soon enough, I arrived in the teleportarium, and took my glove off to caress an atomic warhead. I needed to test a smaller mass teleport, and why not use a sunny message? In a flash, we arrived in the interior of the Pharos and the Blood Angel cursed loudly at the deadly ordnance around. You did steal the torpedoes after all, my lord, he concluded after a minute. I have no recollection of such actions, Blood Angel. And be careful with that kind of accusation. Stealing Exterminatus-grade munitions is a capital crime, and my head is very important. Now, if you recall our CF-deprived discussion a few days ago, you proposed Junkata for Exterminatus. Let me ask an Inquisitor if their crime deserves such a waste of precious munitions. I spoke sternly and closed my eyes to contact my dear Rose. I'm back, my love. Got hit by the backlash quite bad, but now I'm all better. I explained in a short empathic transmission. Strange, but then you were always very strange, even for a rogue trader raised by a tech priest with a blank assassin mother. The Inquisitor replied in a not too friendly tone. My navigator said some kind of Empyrean escaped from Sarum. Was that the bad news? I asked to make sure. It could have been something else. Well, in hindsight, it wasn't all bad. That thing is rumored to massacre millions of cultists and many traitor marines in the Eye of Terror, just for sport. So, you have another target in mind, my dear Pef? She asked a bit more amenable. The Blood Angel captain wants Junkata. It seems they make battleships and demon engines. I want some mech, because they make cogitators. And ships can be destroyed somehow. But, I explained in a short burst, dark cogitators were much scarier than simple battleships. Those things would have scrap codes and whatever other insidious viruses and mimetic infections. The Inquisitor hummed in my mind while she considered options. You are correct, of course. Take a long break between deep strikes, Pef. Those forges aren't going anywhere. But I don't have another rogue to launch Exterminatus from half the galaxy away. Stay safe. With that, I began activating another cyclonic torpedo, to send it deep inside the Hadex anomaly and obliterate the damn cognition danger. In an hour, I was ready and the torpedo vanished into the heart of the anomaly. A few seconds later, a strange wave flashed over the inner cave, like something had tried to scan the source of the torpedo. I fell onto my knees, probably because I was a bit exhausted. Well, there were gods in this universe, and their plans would begin to derail as more dark forges blew up unexpectedly. Another type of wave burst from under our feet and banished the interloper, passing over me and the torpedoes without noticing me at all. However, Captain Raxiatel wasn't so lucky. His eyes began bleeding and he fell to his knees in constant prayer, just like I did. I was only mentally tired, but the Blood Angel was going mad, and very rapidly. Thinking fast, I locked onto Ludvius. Brother, I have one of yours going bad. Sarcophagus, now. I muttered in his mind and pushed the captain into the teleport beam, with my mind. I got him, Lord Pef. What happened? My loyal friend asked from thousands of years away. Some kind of psychic wave. Doesn't work on me, but his eyes went red, I concluded with a weaker voice and triggered my teleport beacon. Hopefully I didn't ruin my brain too much.